Okay, so you know how it is these days, right? AI
Yeah.
is like everywhere. You can't escape it.
Oh, yeah.
It's AI this and that and everything. It's going to solve all the world's problems tomorrow.
Right.
So I don't know about you, but I'm kind of like, is this for real?
Yeah.
What is actually going on here? Are we really talking about intelligence?
Right.
Or is there something else going on that we need to understand a bit better?
Well, I think that's a perfect intro to this deep dive. We're looking at this article by Robert Bauer,
Mm-hmm.
AI thinker or linker. Yeah, and it really cuts through a lot of that hype.
Okay, good.
It gets to like the nuts and bolts of what these systems actually are,
I like it.
you know?
Just talking about the applications,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
talking about the underlying mechanisms.
That's right.
All right, so our mission today, we're going to unpack these terms, artificial and intelligence, as they relate to AI systems.
Absolutely.
We want to get a clear picture
Yeah.
of their true capabilities and limitations,
Right.
specifically around that question,
Mm-hmm.
can they think like a human, or are they doing something else entirely? And the article calls that something else linking.
Linking. Yeah, that's a really important distinction.
Okay, so first things first,
Yeah.
let's just break down this term artificial intelligence, right?
Okay.
It's everywhere. It's inescapable. What are we actually saying when we say those two words together?
So the article actually points out something seems very simple, but it's actually kind of profound.
Okay.
So you've got artificial, which it defines as humanly contrived,
Right.
often on a natural model,
Mhm.
man-made basically. And then you've got intelligence,
Okay.
and that has a more complex definition.
Okay, so on the one hand, you have something that is made by humans,
Right.
and on the other hand, you have this almost ineffable thing,
Yeah.
this quality of intelligence, which we associate with life,
Exactly.
which we associate with, being a person. That's interesting that those two things are being brought together
It is, right.
because in a way, it's almost like a contradiction
Kind of, right.
because one is, human made, and the other one is almost beyond human, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's a really good starting point. Break down those two words before
Yeah.
we even get into what these systems are doing.
And I think the article kind of uses that as a jumping off point
Okay.
to really try to analyze what we mean when we talk about AI.
Right?
Because, we throw that term around.
We do. Become so casual.
Yes.
AI can do this and the AI can do that.
Right.
But are we really? Maybe we need some new language. It's more accurate
Yeah.
to what these systems are actually doing.
Right, because the article lays out one level of intelligence
Okay.
as the efficiency with which the acquisition, analyzation, and adaptation of new information occurs.
So that's a mouthful.
It is.
But I think what it's saying is basically how good is something
Mm-hmm.
at getting information,
Yes.
analyzing it, and then using it,
Yeah.
adapting to it.
And computers have been doing that for a long time.
Right. Like from the very beginning,
Yeah.
that's what computers are for.
Right. They take in information, they process it,
Yeah.
they spit out results,
Yeah. And they learn from it.
and they learn from it.
And as they learn, they get better at what they do.
Exactly.
So we've already seen this kind of basic level of intelligence in computers for decades now.
Yeah. And the article really emphasizes that the artificial part is key here.
Okay.
It's all rooted in computers
Yeah.
and human design. There's nothing magical about
Right.
it.
It is a human created system.
It's a tool that we have built.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that sense, these AI models that we're seeing, they're really the next generation of that same
Yeah. Process,
Yeah,
harnessing computational power.
for specific tasks.
Yeah. And I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because it can get very easy
You get carried away
to get carried away.
with the hype.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, it's still a tool that we are using for our own purposes.
And the article also cautions us about that increased efficiency.
Yeah.
Because if there are errors that we humans introduce into the system,
Yeah.
those can get magnified.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So we have to be really careful about
Yeah.
what we're asking these systems to do
Absolutely.
and how we're designing them.
And understanding those potential biases
Yes.
that we might be putting into the system.
Okay, so we've got this basic level of intelligence,
Right.
which is really about processing information.
Yes.
But the article also hints at this kind of strangeness or
Mhm.
contradiction
Yeah.
in the term artificial intelligence.
Right.
So where's that coming from?
Well, that comes from, I think, when we consider that more comprehensive definition of intelligence.
Okay.
So it's not just about processing information. It's also about things like the capacity for abstraction,
Okay.
logic, understanding self-awareness, learning emotional knowledge.
Wow. So this is getting into like
This is the big stuff.
the nature of consciousness, which we still don't fully understand.
Yeah, the article calls that the hard problem of consciousness
Yeah.
in science, right? Like, we still don't know. Consciousness arises.
Yeah.
So,
So how do we expect
yeah,
to create it artificial?
exactly. And that's where I think the contradiction comes in, because you have something that's completely human-made,
Right.
but then you're trying to replicate something that we
Yeah.
don't even fully understand ourselves.
Okay, so that leads us to this really interesting question that the article poses: thinker or linker? So how does the article break down the difference between those two?
So the article suggests that thinking
Mm-hmm.
in the human sense
Yeah,
involves all those things we just talked about.
right.
Reasoning, abstraction,
Yeah.
self-awareness, motivation,
Yeah.
imagination.
Right. And these are all things that arise naturally
Yes,
in human beings,
in organic life.
in organic life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these aren't things that we program, just emerge from the complexity of our brains.
From the complexity of life itself.
Right. And the systems that we're seeing, like
Uh-huh.
these large language models,
Yeah, the LLMs.
yeah, the LLMs,
Mm-hmm.
are they actually doing that?
Well, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
And I think the article argues that they're not,
Okay.
because what they're doing is linking.
Linking.
Yeah. So they're taking in vast amounts of information and they're finding patterns. They're
Right.
making connections based on the prompts that we give them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still all based on existing data.
It's not creating anything new. Okay, so it's more like a super advanced search engine
Kind of. Yeah.
than it is like a human brain.
Yeah. And I think the article uses that analogy to really drive home the point that these systems are incredibly powerful at what they do,
Mm-hmm.
but they are still limited
Limited by the data they have access to.
by the data,
Yeah.
by the algorithms that we create.
Right. So they're not actually understanding the information.
Right.
They're just finding patterns.
They're just connecting the dots.
Right. And that's where the linker idea comes in. They're linking things on the rules that we set.
Right.
And so, the article kind of comes to the conclusion
Yeah.
that current AI is an ever improving linker,
Right.
not a thinker.
Not a thinker. Yeah.
And the author even suggests that maybe a more accurate term would be expert systems.
Expert systems.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not artificial intelligence, but expert systems.
Expert systems.
Because they're really good at specific tasks.
Yes.
Like, we have software that's really good at word processing
Right.
or spreadsheets.
Exactly.
But these are like
Put on a supercharged versions of that.
on a much grander scale.
Right.
With much more data,
Yeah.
much more processing power.
So they're expert systems,
Mm-hmm.
not artificial intelligence.
And I think that distinction is really important.
It is, because it helps us to understand
Yeah.
what these systems can do
Mhm.
and what they can't do,
And what they can't do.
and not get carried away with the hype.
Exactly.
Like I remember the article brought up this really fascinating point. What would happen
Mhm.
if we gave these AI systems unrestricted access to the internet?
The whole thing.
Like the entire internet,
Yeah.
all the information that's out there.
Yeah. What would happen?
What was the author's take on that?
So the author speculates that
Yeah.
if you just let these LLMs and algorithms loose on the internet with no constraints,
Right.
what you would end up with is a giant mess.
Okay.
Because the internet is full of
Oh, it's full of garbage.
great. It's full of conflicting information.
Yeah.
It's full of nonsense.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff,
There is good stuff,
but there's also a lot of bad stuff.
but there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these systems would just be
They would just be amplifying that noise.
amplifying the noise
Yeah.
because they don't have
Yeah.
the ability.
They don't have the
Well,
ability
it's
to
just
discern
true.
what's false, what's valuable, what's not valuable.
They don't have that critical thinking
They
ability.
don't have that judgment. Yeah.
So they would just be
They'd be like a giant
giant echo chambers.
echo chamber,
Yeah.
of nonsense.
Nonsense. And the article uses this really colorful phrase to describe it.
What is it?
It says it would be like a
Yeah.
seriously confused, narcissistic, bipolar pile of pablum.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a mouthful.
it is.
But it's also a very vivid image.
It is very vivid. Yeah.
And I think it really gets the point across,
Which is that
which is that these systems are not,
human.
they're not human.
They don't think like humans.
They don't have that level
Yeah.
of understanding and discernment.
Okay. So now we're getting to this idea of an assistant
Yeah.
controlled by the owner.
Right.
And this is where I think it gets really interesting, because we've got these expert systems that are doing all this linking,
Linking.
but they're not thinking.
Right.
So how do we manage that?
Well, I think the article suggests that a personal assistant controlled by the owner
Right.
would essentially be a more sophisticated way for us to interact with and direct these systems.
Okay.
So think of it as a central interface
Right.
where we can give these systems very specific prompts and define very specific parameters for them to operate within.
So it's like giving them a set of rules
Exactly.
and boundaries
Boundaries, yeah,
and saying, okay, you can operate
within these limits.
within these limits,
Yes.
but you can't go beyond that.
And that, I think, is really crucial because it really emphasizes that these systems
Yeah.
are not independent entities.
Right. They're not making their own decisions.
They're not making their own decisions. They're tools.
They're tools.
Yeah.
They're tools that are controlled by us.
That's right.
And we have to be the ones who are responsible for how they're used. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the outcomes that they produce.
You're understanding the limitations
Yeah.
of those outcomes as well.
Right. Because they're not perfect.
They're not perfect.
They're not going to give us perfect.
And we have to be critical
Right.
of the information that they provide.
We can't just blindly accept it.
We can't just take it as gospel.
Right.
Yeah.
So that owner control
Yeah.
is really important.
It's paramount.
It is. Yeah. Because it keeps these systems in check.
Yeah. It maintains that balance
Yeah.
of power.
Right. And it also helps us to understand,
Right.
for the listener, that when we're talking about AI, we're not talking about some kind of magical thinking machine.
Some kind of sentient being
Right.
that's going to take over the world.
That's going to, enslave humanity,
Right.
like we see in the movies.
Exactly.
It's not that.
It's not that.
It's something much more grounded.
It's much more practical.
Yeah.
It's-
It's a tool that we can use for good or for bad.
Right.
But we have to be the ones who are making those decisions.
Yeah. It's up to us
It's up to us
to steer the ship.
to steer the ship.
Yeah.
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 So that's a really important takeaway, I think, for anyone who's listening to this.
Absolutely.
Don't get carried away with the hype.
Don't believe the hype.
Understand what these systems are actually capable of,
What they can do
what they can't do,
and what they can't do
and how we can use them
and how we can use them
responsibly
responsibly. Yeah.
and ethically.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
I agree.
But I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
This article got me thinking about,
Yep.
you know how much we still don't know about consciousness? Like the fact that we can't even explain how it arises in our own brain makes me wonder, what if in the future our scientific models
Right.
undergo some kind of shift?
Paradigm shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we suddenly have this much deeper understanding
Yeah.
of what consciousness, how it works.
And how it works. Unlock
Yeah.
possibilities for artificial systems, for
Apologies.
AI
Yeah.
that we can't even imagine right now.
It's hard to even fathom.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, what if these expert systems
Hmm.
that we're talking about today
Right.
suddenly seem rudimentary,
Primitive.
primitive, yeah,
Yeah.
compared to what we might be able to create?
Right. Because we're essentially working with a very limited
Limited understanding.
understanding of
Much
intelligence
intelligence.
right now.
Right.
So that's just something to think about.
It is food for thought.
Food for thought as
Yeah.
we continue to explore
Yeah.
this really fascinating, rapidly evolving field of AI.
Absolutely.
So keep thinking, keep questioning,
Keep learning.
and we'll see you next time.